alarm is numb, the Keurig's clean. Your dog is dead, it's a Ponzi screen. Ponzi screen, Ponzi screen, because it's just something to do.
But the Prop 22 stuff, I mean, it affects me literally. By the way, listeners, it's just it's what do we call it? This is a
Just Mario and Luigi today.
Yes, yeah. It's just David and I today.
Dave and Dan.
Gabe had to go over to Belarus for a CIA assignment. Yes.
Let's just say that Gabe found a flight.
Yeah.
It was difficult to find a flight at other times of year.
Yeah. He's liberating the Belarusian president from his kingdom. Yes.
Yeah. When Gabe and I have a White Russian together, we have very different ideas about what that means.
Yeah. Honestly, dude, getting murdered or assassinated by Gabe would maybe be the most that'd be terrifying. Like, cause it's like, I feel like
he'd be good at it.
He'd be really good at it. He'd just be like, I got you, compadre, and then like slot, and then you're like, oh god.
Yeah, he'd probably be wearing like really, really nice, like cutting edge, like fashion, and sitting on his couch, just like chilling out, just like reclining, and then be like, I poisoned you 15 minutes ago.
Yeah,
you didn't even notice.
Yeah, he would be a really good Bond villain. Gabe would be a fantastic Bond villain.
Yeah, dude. I recently tried to watch one of the old Bond movies that was on Amazon. Just it was From Russia with Love. Incomprehensible plot.
Nice.
Nothing. I have no idea what happened. It was like there's like a shadow. There's like a shadow organization where essentially the inspiration for Dr. Evil is in that one, and he has the cat and he's rubbing the cat and stuff like that. And the shadow criminal syndicate either does work for the Soviets or is betraying the Soviets, or they were trying to steal a nuclear bomb from the Americans, or they were part of the Americans in coordination. There was really no real way of knowing, because it was just an excuse for Sean Connery to sleep with like the leggy Russian blonde.
Yeah.
And then there was some hijinks. There was a guy who was like another blonde Russian guy who worked for someone. I don't really know exactly. And he was trying to kill James Bond, and I don't know. There was a lot of factors. And then their gadgets were great because it was all pre-computer. So it was just like, this is a knife that comes out of a suitcase. Like,
yeah, that's right. Yeah. It's the stab. It's a stab case. Is what it is.
Yeah. It was. I don't know. I fell asleep. I don't know what happened. I think James. James survived.
I think he was fine actually. No, there's there's like an Ivan Drago like character in that one, right? Who's like just like a big Russian guy with like a yeah. All the heavies in early James Bond movies end up being like they're somehow invincible. Like they're impervious to all attacks unless that attack is like getting hit by a train. Like that's what happens. That's how you kill one of them, essentially.
Yeah, it's kind of there's always like the id villain, just kind of like the one who used to stab them 15 times and make their like body explode before they'll actually die. Whereas the real like villain is the mastermind and is plotting it all, but they always have like the one really big henchman who you got to kill 15 different ways, who's half giant or whatever.
Yeah. He's Hagrid essentially.
Evil Russian Hagrid.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad we're bringing this up because it is, of course, like now transitioning into the holiday season, and this is like you're bringing me back to like 13-year-old me, literally watching every single one of those goddamn movies.
You've seen them all? Wow.
Yeah, because it was no, I think I missed the George Lazenby one, which is the one that he did, and I missed a lot of the Timothy Dalton ones, which are the ones that were made in like the late 80s.
You're talking about the directors, not the Bonds.
No, I'm talking about literally the Bonds, because
I just don't know. I know there's Pierce Brosnan and Roger Moore and Sean Connery, and then the new guy. But
it's super goofy. There's those three, but then there was like a minute in like the fourth movie where George Lazenby, who was Australian, who like fucked a lot in real life and stuff, and like he was like absolutely uncontainable. He was like weird. He only did one James Bond movie. George Lazenby was one of them, and then Timothy Dalton, who did like the weirdo 80s ones in between Roger Moore and Pierce Brosnan. So he was James Bond for a little bit.
Cool.
Yeah. So I didn't really watch I didn't watch those ones, but I watched like all the Roger Moore ones, all of the Sean Connery ones, because they just played them on TBS. Like they played them all in order, and I fucking watched all of those ones. And you're right, like some of those ones in the middle are like, they're like, have you seen Thunderball? It's pretty fun. they're like,
I would
Thunderball.
watch it. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I have not seen Thunderball. I really like the espionage shit. I love the little gadgets. I mean, it's just, you don't go into a Bond movie to like learn anything. You just watch like vroom vroom boom boom sex cool. Like there's no like
yes.
Go in and have fun and don't pay that much attention to the plot, right? Like there's a point where literally like James Bond is in this like remote village somewhere, and he watches these two women fight over who gets to marry the prince of the village, and they're just like two hot chicks like beating each other up. I think they're in like a gypsy village, and they beat each other up, and then afterwards, after some series of events, somehow James Bond is sitting at a tent, and the tribal elder is like, actually, James Bond, we want you to choose which chick gets to marry the tribal elder. And he's like, and then he's like, I've got a plan for that. And then, and then like both of the ladies like look at him, and he looks at them, and then like lights fade down. And then and then it's like the next morning, like Sean Connery's like adjusting his tie, and it's like, nice, dude. You got like
nice.
James Bond just got like prima nocta on that village. Pretty sweet, dude.
I love there's, I mean, for all the listeners out there, if someone has a gun to your head and they say you have to watch one classic Sean Connery James Bond, watch Goldfinger. Goldfinger is the one to watch. It's a really good. It's very good. Yeah, it's very good. Watch Goldfinger. The rest of them are, like David said, it is obvious that at some point in the filming process, they literally just let Sean Connery be the director. And he was like, "What? Is there a moment where I could hit these women?" Like, and they're like, "It's in his contract." Also, for people who don't, for people who don't understand what I'm talking about, there's that infamous interview between him and Barbara Walters, where Barbara Walters like, "Oh, so this was like in the 80s, where she's like, so you had this like this one quote where it says every woman needs to be hit once or twice," and instead of sort of like being like, "Well, that was taken out of context," he just sort of like, "Yep."
You did an interview in which you said, not the worst thing to slap a woman now and then. As I remember, you said you don't do it with a clenched fist. It's better to do it with an open hand. Yeah, remember that? Yeah. I didn't love that.
I haven't changed my opinion.
and it's just sort of like, damn, this guy was terrible. This guy's, I mean, yeah, just like, and Barbara Walters is like, I don't think I agree with that, and he's just sort of like, well, I don't care. It's definitely old. It's got old school Joe Biden vibes for sure.
Right. I mean,
yeah.
I like I can't not think of his character from SNL's Celebrity Jeopardy when I think of Sean Connery.
Yeah.
And then and also the fact that him and Alex Trebek died within 2 weeks of each other is just
that was great. Yeah. Apparently, James Bond. Apparently, fucking Sean Connery had dementia or something like that too. Nice. So, respect. I mean, the the things coming out of his mouth, bro, in those last 2 weeks. Also, I think on a larger scale, I think there's something to be said about those movies because American culture vilifies the Soviet Union in really profound and intense ways all the time and paints them as this undoable, unconquerable foe or whatever, that this clash of cultures between 1950 to 1990 essentially.
Yeah.
And we have to remember the entire time the James Bond film series was happening, and their main bad guy very often was the Soviet Union or Russians, and shit like that. And they just sort of casually mention it, and it's just a great analog to what that culture actually or what was actually happening, where it was just sort of well, these two places don't play nice, but except for the Cuban Missile Crisis, nothing too crazy going on here.
I would love to see a James Bond, but he's actually just starting a proxy war, James, James Bond fakes the Gulf of Tonkin Peninsula, attack or whatever.
yeah.
Yeah. So okay, so we got some stuff we got two big things to talk about.
First, speaking of countries which we do not have a good relation with.
And I'm talking, of course, about Uber.
Yeah.
The Silicon Valley, the company or the country that we don't have a good relationship with. So
it's not a state yet.
Not a state yet. So they had Prop 22 happened. It passed. Now in California, if you are a gig economy worker, you derive wages from one of the apps, Uber, Lyft, TaskRabbit, DoorDash, Instacart. You are not classified as an employee, counter to the state legislature passing a law saying that you should have been, which was called AB 5. Prop 22 made a special carve out just for independent contractors who get work through internet-based apps, right? It is it's technologically explicit.
Yeah, it's their own version of gerrymandering, where you got this a ridiculous district that's just sort of you know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and look, this isn't the first time that entire swaths of the economy have been cut out of American labor law. It's important to remember that, outside of a few states, farmers don't have any protections under the National Labor Relations Act. Domestic house workers don't. Family members, you can't unionize against dad, which is all we really want to do.
Oh man. Oh my god, dude. Yeah. I'm fucking boycotting my mom. Don't you dare cross that fucking picket line. Don't you do it.
Aunt Nancy, don't get involved in this.
Do not you are a scab. You are a scab. Oh my god, I'm unionizing my family. This is the best. This is the best idea you've ever come up with, David.
So, so those are there are some huge parts of the economy that are excluded from labor law, and in the past that was based off of racist stuff, and now it is the advertising for Prop 22 was actually for racial justice. It was all of these advertisements, they to get all of these low income and immigrant and minority workers who are gigging. They used them as props, essentially, no pun intended, to get them in their marketing for passing Prop 22, saying, we want this. This is the thing that we want. Meanwhile, they were using coercive tactics, some stuff that I outlined in the last time we talked about this, and also my story for the markup. I've got another piece in the markup coming out this week that's going to be talking about what they're doing next Also, it should note that the proponents of Prop 22 literally bribed one of the local heads of the NAACP to come out in support of Prop 22. So,
I'll add that in later. It'll be great. It'll be great.
That is, yeah, that's like a pretty well reported and well documented fact. So, where we're going next, basically, after it happened, the CEO of Uber, Dara Khosrowshahi,
Dara Kardashian.
I usually feel bad about mispronouncing names, but I don't know. I might.
Let me look this guy up.
So
I'm gonna look this guy up.
Basically, after in an earnings call, he said that they want to more loudly advocate for laws like Prop 22, and that the company will prioritize working with governments across the U.S. and the world to make this a reality. Lyft's co-founder John Zimmer told Axios that he wants to do it. He will do it state by state if they need to, but that it would easier to do it at a federal level. And then DoorDash's global head of public affairs told the markup, that they are ready to work with legislators everywhere on policies that protect Dasher flexibility. So,
oh my gosh, dude, this guy, he's
Dara?
a fucking no, dude. Dara, he's Iranian. He's Iranian. He was born in Tehran and everything. What a fucking dude, fucking loser. Oh, he's born in 1969 though. That's pretty cool. Nice.
I'm just waiting for like 1969. I'm just waiting for like an Iranian racist who also hates Uber. Like I hate Prop 22 and Ahmadinejad. But I don't know. Anyway, so what's going to happen now is they're basically for the past few years, actually, these companies have been spent a lot of money on lobbying the federal government and state governments. One estimate is that they've spent $1.2 million lobbying the federal government just in the first half of 2020. That was Uber and Lyft combined. And much of their lobbying was in opposition to a law called the Protecting Our Right to Organize Act, the PRO Act. The PRO Act passed the House of Representatives. It's the most expansive law of labor and employee rights in generations. I mean, and I'm actually very impressed.
Really?
Yeah.
Why have I not heard of this? This is the first time I'm hearing of this PRO Act. This hasn't passed my desk at all. This is crazy.
I think that there's a lot of people on the left. There's a lot of people get currency on center left, Democrats or whatever, as being anti-worker, and so there's cultural currency in criticizing them. And then the center left doesn't really want to advertise it either because their backers are not exactly pro-union. So no one really wants to advertise it either way. But in reality, this thing, and also it was never going to pass the Senate, and it was going to get vetoed by Trump no matter what. So it had no chance of passing. But nonetheless, what this would have done is it would have made it much easier to form a union. All you need is a card check majority. You don't have to have an election. And there would have been a lot of other stronger protections for people expressing an interest in unionizing, etc., and also stricter penalties for violations there by employers against unions. And in addition, it would have federally defined gig workers as employees.
That's when it's one of those little laws, or could have been one of those little laws where like Bernie just sort of like he sort of like salt bayed in just sort of like this this little addition where it's just sort of like card check is it and gig workers are also employees, like one of those ones.
He got it in there. I don't know. I mean, it's amazing. I'm actually I'm impressed that it passed the House. Frankly, it passed the House, and there were 7 Democrats who voted against it, and there were 5 Republicans who voted for it, which is interesting.
Do you have the list of the Democrats who voted against it? I want to guess.
I don't have it on me right now, but they are mostly from more rural and southern states. So, but the 5 Republicans who voted from it were like almost all from New York and New Jersey, I think.
That makes sense.
I don't have. I used to have it and I lost it. So, basically, after that pass, I think of that the PRO Act passing in some ways similar to in 2017 when like Kamala Harris and a bunch of other, center left Democrats endorsed Medicare for all.
Yeah.
It's just kind of one of those things that you can do it when it stands no chance of becoming a reality. So they basically, came out and supported it, passed, but Uber and Lyft spent a lot of their lobbying money on the PRO Act, and because they didn't do that, because they wanted to not have it pass, but now that even if the Democrats do retake the Senate, it is not a guarantee that it is going to pass. There is at least one Democratic senator, Senator Mark Warner from Virginia, who is skeptical of the PRO Act. He has not said one way or the other whether he would support it or not. Tim Kaine, also of Virginia, Hillary Clinton's running mate, was also on the fence. I think he came out in support of the PRO Act, but Mark Warner might not necessarily be alone in his support of some sort of Prop 22 like legislation that would create this third category of worker, right?
Mhm.
So he said in a statement, we know independent contract workers are not all the same. Some are misclassified or prefer to be treated as full-time employees, while others genuinely prefer to be independent contractors and use this kind of work to supplement other employment. And he thinks that voters all over the country made it clear that policymakers should take a nuanced approach to the labor market. Nuance, creativity, innovation, these words mean deregulate.
These words mean you're fucked.
They're not.
Yeah.
It's just like it's always modernized. Oftentimes can be this sort of thing. Like people say, oh well, these labor laws are so outdated. They passed over 70 years ago. We need to modernize them for the modern economy, and all that sort of stuff is usually an attempt by corporate interests to undermine labor law. So then even if we do win Georgia, if our winner John Ossoff, the guy who always wins, the guy we know and love,
favorite boy, yeah,
the favorite boy that everyone loves and always wins. If he wins his seat, and if Reverend Warnock wins his seat, I think it's amazing that John Ossoff, as a Jewish man, would be so brave to run on the same ticket as Adolf Hitler himself, Reverend Warnock. I mean, it
yes,
is just really a very proud, brave Jewish John Ossoff. So anyways, if both of them do win and it is a 50-50 split in the Senate, there's still not guaranteed, and Kamala Harris will, break the tie. It is not exactly assured that the PRO Act would pass. If it did, then that would undo Prop 22, basically. That would make, because how federal law works, federal law overrides state laws. And as a general principle, it's called preemption. And if that happened, Prop 22 would be undone, and these battles would all be over, basically. And we would have, until Uber and Lyft lobbied successfully to have that section of the PRO Act undone, which they would inevitably try to do because they spent $200 million in California alone. They'll spend billions at the federal level trying to undo the PRO Act if it were to ever pass.
That would, I mean, on its face, I think it would be very well. Okay, so, I mean, my immediate reaction, not to get too electoral about it, but I mean, my immediate thing when you said that, it's like, oh, it's like a 50-50 split, Kamala Harris makes the tie-breaking thing, I would immediately say, I mean, Joe Manchin just immediately just goes against that. Like, there's no way he would vote for that. He's a senator from, I believe, West Virginia.
Yeah.
And that state that has an absolutely pristine record of not blowing up its unionized workforce with cannons and shit like that,
Right, right.
Yeah.
I mean, it is an interesting question because Joe Manchin is, in all intents and purposes, a coal executive.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Or at least, fights hard to do so. But he also is a Democrat, and in West Virginia, unions have some sort of historical appreciation. It's kind of one of those places that is turned very hard right in a lot of instances because the right, has serves their interest, whether they are, increasing fossil fuel production or, if someone resents culture wars, then they'll vote for Republicans as well because that serves their interest as well. But but unions are one of those things where people sometimes have a historically good association with them in places like West Virginia. So,
Oh, I bet Joe Manchin will be like, "We are a proud union state," or whatever he wants to say. But you could take this Danny bet to the bank. He will vote against it. He will never. He will never actually do it. It's weird because then you have those states like us, like New York and New Jersey and stuff like that, where it's like that. I feel like those lines matter in like our kind of neck of the woods a little bit more.
Yeah.
They just like, no matter how much Cuomo or whatever wants to like deregulate things, it's really hard for it to happen. But I feel like places like Kentucky and West Virginia and parts of Tennessee, those like that sort of Appalachian Rust Belty sort of area, they're so beat down by those things where it's just like when people like Joe Manchin can essentially just be like, no, he could on his face be like, I love unions, and then just be like, we're not doing that.
Could be
Like,
true. I mean, definitely could be right. I mean, certainly people like Mark Warner who are Democrats but have zero association with unions. These sorts of kind of more new Democrats, Clintonite kind of Democrats, certainly have zero association with unions and have no real ties to unions other than the fact that the AFL-CIO is basically an extension of the Democratic Party, for better or for worse. Anyways, I don't know. So there's not a huge chance that it's going to pass, but even if that doesn't happen, there are some things that Biden could do through executive action to make things a little bit better for Prop 22 gig workers. There was a administrative change, basically a rule that Trump's National Labor Relations Board, their general counsel, is this guy named Peter Robb, who was formerly a litigator in the Reagan administration that broke up the airline. Who are the people who do the
air traffic controllers?
Air traffic controllers went on strike in the 80s, and that was one of the biggest high-profile union busting campaigns in the early Reagan administration, and was like shifted, was just one of these huge generational shifts in how American industry have used labor, and huge victory for employers everywhere, basically. And this guy was a litigator for it, and he is now the NLRB general counsel for the Trump administration. And he basically said, independent contractors, gig workers are independent contractors. End of story. And they passed a rule. Their DOL passed a rule basically that would define as such. It hasn't been fully finalized yet. So all these things Biden could easily just undo by executive action. He can fire this Peter Robb guy, on January 21st. These are things that he could do on the federal level, but that's not a permanent solution. That's just kind of undoing a federal stance, essentially. But that's not really going to do anything with teeth with Prop 22. So unless there is somehow a miraculous increase in the Senate in 2022, on the federal level, they're probably not going to pass the PRO Act, which would be the way to really undo Prop 22. And also, there's some real questions about Biden and Harris and their relationship with big tech. Okay, I mean,
especially Kamala Harris.
I mean, it's both, man. I mean, Kamala Harris was the attorney general for the state of California, and she was also the district attorney for San Francisco, and she has a lot of ties to big tech, right? Like, she has a former staffer of hers now works for Facebook. She has her brother-in-law and longtime advisor is the chief legal officer for Uber, who sent okay.
Oh boy.
Tony West. Yeah, Tony West was one of the people who was sending emails to Uber employees encouraging them to vote yes on Prop 22. Okay, like that's one of them, but that's not the only one. Okay, a lot of Obama administration officials moved to Silicon Valley after leaving the administration. Former Secretary of Transportation under Obama, Anthony Fox, is now the chief policy officer at Lyft.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, I heard about that. Yeah.
Yeah, David Plouffe, who did Obama's 2008 campaign, was Uber's senior vice president for policy until 2017. What happened in 2017, he was fined for lobbying without registering Mayor Rahm Emanuel on behalf of Uber.
Oh God, I love. See, this is the crazy thing is like, I mean, we're what the election was on the 3rd. We're almost a month out of the election formally happening, and maybe about 2 weeks from like some sort of legitimate, like electoral confirmation, where they're like, okay, Biden won Pennsylvania and stuff like that,
right.
and we're already turning into this sort of it's like, I mean, I was like, oh yeah, he's gonna appoint the worst people. Like it's gonna be the most hilarious self-dealing, but it's getting real. The connections that he has, and that Kamala specifically has to these people is like, it's comical. It's so plain.
So one of the craziest ones is Anita Dunn, who is basically ran Biden's 2020 campaign. She's his top advisor. She is a partner at a PR and lobbying firm called SKD Knickerbocker, and this firm runs. They basically have been running this front group for Lyft and Uber on a pro bono basis. Okay, to do lobbying for Uber and Lyft in New York State and federally, I think. But in New York State is what I saw. And yeah, so that's a top Biden advisor who's just a partner at a firm who's still actively doing lobbying for Uber and Lyft. So that could go. We don't know what the appointments are going to be. I think the fact that Yellen was appointed to Treasury means something and nothing. Like, he could have chosen like Tim Geithner. He could have chosen or he could have fucking chosen, I don't know, the current CEO of Robinhood, I think, Dan Gallagher. I mean, he could have chosen like a real conservative. I don't think he was going to without upsetting the progressive base. Hell, he could have chosen Rahm Emanuel. I mean, he almost chose Rahm Emanuel for Secretary of Transportation, which would have been very, very well connected to this Uber and Lyft fight. Very much so. We don't know. He's not going to get transportation now. Rahm Emanuel needs to stay the hell away from the federal government, and so it all just depends on who he's going to appoint to the DOL. Also, huge appointment to the Department of Labor. I mean,
yeah, it's. I mean, I don't think this is an exaggeration to say that like the policy will be a massive sweeping policy, especially when it comes to these kinds of contentious issues like Uber and Lyft stuff, is literally going to be decided by the last person in the room. Because Joe Biden is like a fucking old loser. So it's like somewhere in the back of his like decaying brain, he hears the word union and he's just sort of like, oh yeah. And like he is kind of like that. But it is literally the last person who talks to him is the one who will get their policy done. Like it's going to be that. It's going to be that.
That doesn't seem unreasonable at all. And especially Joe's style, which we've talked about, the Delaware way, is very much that. It's just it's getting to know you. It's having conversations. It's working. It's adversaries colluding basically, and it's just kind of trying to come up with something that makes everybody happy, but doesn't really make anything better for anybody outside the room.
Yeah, it's one of those situations where the only way we have any chance of any sort of meaningful progressive thing would be if Bernie Sanders somehow is part of his cabinet in any way. And like I said, is like it's going to be a matter of like they're all in a room And they're all right, meeting adjourned. Everybody leaves, and then Bernie's like, "Hold on, Joe. I have something to tell you." And like,
Right.
and then they will be, and then Joe's like, "Oh, my friend wants to talk to me," and then he does it, and then like that, like that's the only way. That's the only way those things will happen, because otherwise you just have a bunch of ghouls around him who are just sort of like, deregulate it.
I heard that somebody said that Bernie's probably not going to get Department of Labor head because if he did, then under Vermont state law, the governor would appoint his replacement. And right now, the governor of Vermont is a Republican.
Yeah.
So they would actually, he's not going to get in the cabinet for that reason.
Sure, yeah. Same deal that is, again, that's the old California way. That's fucking what's his Newsom, Gavin Newsom.
Yeah.
He's appointing
Right.
Kamala's replacement, which is weird. Just always so weird. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think Bernie will ultimately die in Vermont. He's I don't think he's ever going to meaningfully go out of there.
I mean, if the Senate went back to Democrats, I think I thought of some tweet that he would be like in charge of a committee chair, like a pretty powerful committee chairmanship on like health and human services or pharmaceuticals or something like that, and he would have some pretty big power in the Senate. Actually, which would be kind of interesting. One more thing about Joe Biden's cabinet. Joe Biden has a transition team right now, and every department has a team of people that are like advising to try and choose the person who's going to be heading it and the policy initiatives and stuff. A Bernie Sanders staffer is on it, and there's a lot of other people on it. One of the people that is also on it is this guy named Seth Harris, no relation to Kamala. He is he is Obama's former acting Secretary of Labor. In 2015, he wrote an influential paper that basically created the third category worker.
Really? I did not know that. Okay, that's new information to me.
So a former Obama acting Secretary of Labor was the one who invented the Prop 22 category. Okay? So, I mean, like, the Obama administration was all over the elements of creating the Prop 22 category. I read a paper from 2015, and the initial stance of the industry, of employers, was no on this third category because the third category would ruin the independent contractor status and it'd be too complicated. Now, because they're having it threatened that they would just treat them as employees outright, now all of a sudden the industry loves this third category position. But it was the Obama administration that was the first people that proposed the idea. It was an acting Secretary of Labor, Seth Harris. So all of that said, we don't know what's going to happen right now. It could go a few ways. In the meantime, there's the Trump SEC is basically standing with their Department of Labor. They proposed a rule that is going to be passed finalized in 30 days, or the comment period is going to end in 30 days, that would allow for gig workers to receive as compensation up to 15% of their annual wages, stock options in the company.
Oh my God, that is such a poison pill. That is the fun. That shit is, dude. Okay. Look, I know what they're doing. They're like, oh, look, and it's like, what are you talking about? We're talking about Uber. We're talking about a company that its job is to lose money.
Yeah, dude.
its job is to take billions of dollars and just flush it down the toilet. Like, the only quasi-representative sort of financial arm that monitors these things is, the stock exchange, essentially. And all of those people are so bearish on any of these things. Like, when the office one,
Securities and Exchange Commission.
No. The company.
Oh, WeWork.
When WeWork comes out and their prospectus is sort of like, well, we are not actually real, and then the stock exchange is like, no, and then I mean, Lyft has never done great. Uber has never done great. Like, the only tech companies that do really good are the ones that like actually make something, and
Right.
have big. I mean, like for all the ways I hate Tesla, it's like their stock is skyrocketing because like as you've mentioned, the stock market is just sort of like that. It has that mood ring vibe to it, and they're just sort of like people will buy cars, and Apple
Right.
people will buy computers. But people see the writing on the wall when it comes to all of the technologies company. Uber is, I think their actual name is Uber Technologies.
Yeah, that's a
And
political move to try and avoid being regulated as a taxi company.
exactly, and like it's not great. I can literally pull up Robinhood right now.
What's really depressing about this is you're supposed to not be a worker, and yet you would get paid in compensation and ownership of a company that you don't work for.
Yeah, it's so weird and loopy.
I mean, like you can't like there's no. I mean, like, look, you can never assume good faith with these sorts of things. This whole thing was just a cost saving device to cut down on labor costs and labor liability, and to stop the growth of unions and things like that in the gig sector. But if you were to assume good faith on Prop 22, the logic doesn't make sense. Why would you give an independent contractor ownership of your company? They're a contract. You're not going to give you're like, if a plumber fixes your house, you're not going to give them 15% of their compensation as just a piece of your mortgage.
Dude, what if that would be so funny if they're like, all right, you guys get stock options, and then in the biggest insider trading bid of all history, all people who own Uber stock who also drive Uber are just sort of like sell, and like they cause it like to dip down a bit. I looked it up just now, by the way. Lyft and Uber, they both sell and trade for like between $40 and $50. Uber has gained, in the time that it's been like a stock, $5 in like 5 years, and it's only recently that it's jumped up with the rest of the stock market. Lyft only lost
22 passing.
Yeah, Lyft only lost money. It's only lost money.
Yeah.
Like it. So it's like I mean, if they're just like, oh, we'll give you stock options in fucking Ford or Apple or something, I'd be like, hell yeah, man, that sounds awesome.
I mean, if they were going to do that, that's just called a 401k. Like that's just
yeah,
like,
exactly.
we'll give you a retirement package. Okay, cool, but that's not what this is. And also, okay, not every gig worker works for one of these big ones. Sometimes they work for really small ones, these startups. Okay, and what is the biggest scam in a startup? To avoid having to pay people in stock
Options. Yeah,
stock options.
Yeah.
Okay, so these are people who will be driving and doing the actual labor for a startup. Let's say it's like a puppy delivery company or whatever. And they hire all these gig workers through PPY. It's called Puppy, and they have 5 employees who work in the office and 15 employees who are actually delivering the puppies. They're going to pay them less. They're able to pay them less with bullshit stock options. And they're probably not like Class A shares. They're Class B shares or even Class C shares. So they're not even that good. They're not even that meaningful.
They're not that choice.
They're not that choice. And
they're getting mids. They're getting mids. Mid stock. They're getting mid stocks.
They're going to get mid stocks, and they're going to pay them just that way. They can pay them even less. Okay. And like you could do that as a way to skirt around, I don't know, New York City, which passed a law which required an actual minimum wage for gig workers. So in New York City, gig workers, Uber and Lyft drivers, have to be paid from when they log on to when they log off. It's one of the only jurisdictions where they're required to get paid for that. It's some sort of a minimum wage. And nowhere else does it really have that. And so for that, I don't know, they would just get, they could cut into this SEC rule would allow them to basically to cut into that minimum wage even more so.
Yeah, and I can tell you, the way they would pitch any kind of stock option thing is like, I know exactly what they would do as a person who works for these apps. Is like they're not going to do the sort of like absolute like catastrophic thing where they're just sort of like, you only get paid in stock. What they'll have a little bubble come up on the app, and it'll just be like, hey, if you'd like, we could give you stock, and it'll be like this much more. It'll be like 5% more or something like that. Or it'll just be they'll take a more harsh route on it, and it'll just be like, they'll basically they'll do what like not Urban Outfitters, the other clothes exchange, Buffalo Exchange. They'll just pull a Buffalo Exchange where they're just sort of like, you bring your old pair of jeans, and they're like, all right, we'll give you $5 for this or $50 store credit. Like they're just gonna they're gonna do that, where it's like the obvious choice is like, oh, the stock. I got to choose the stock.
I would imagine that they would offer that as a condition of employment, and it's basically something you can't get around. And they'll just say, no, when you are from now on, when you're a driver for Uber, we're just 15% of your wages are going to be Uber stocks. And what that's going to do is that's going to drive up Uber stocks as well, because then there's more people buying it, if I'm understanding it correctly.
Well, not only that, but if they do that, like, I would not be. I mean, like, now we're sort of treading into sort of like, not Supreme Court law, but just precedent in general, where it's just sort of like, can people sell stocks whenever they want to? But if I would not be surprised for an absolute second if they pulled, you have to buy, part of your wages are stocks. Also, you have to wait 5 years before you can sell it. Like it's like they would absolutely have like a peer, some weird sort of there's another term where like
restrictions.
Yeah, just like a restriction. Yeah, like when you work for a company and they're like when you work vesting, yeah, they would have like a vesting law essentially that, or rather a divesting law,
Yeah, that just like you can't access what your stock options are until you have gone through it. Yeah, I mean the whole thing is also just further trying to cement gig worker definition federally, basically, and who knows if that's even going to get undone. I really am not sure. That also depends on who the next SEC chair is, and just because you are a Democratic chair of the Securities and Exchange Commission does not mean that you're going to be like do the most pro worker, pro investor, pro consumer thing out there. Generally you do, but not everyone does everything, and there's a big revolving door, and so. Anyways, that's kind of what the federal scene is looking like with Prop 22. Looking at the states, the biggest thing has been New York. I mean, it is all going to come down to New York, like, because everyone I spoke to is just like, it's all going to come down to New York. New York is the biggest market. It's the next big target. And New York, 1/3 of every worker in New York State is unionized. Big union culture here, more so than any other state in the union. It's going to be a big battle. And if they win New York, they've just got the whole gravy train going. They got everything.
They're like, people have been like, oh, Illinois is another one of those things. No, Illinois is going to topple like a fucking domino.
Second city, man. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I'm sorry, Chicago, ain't gonna happen. You have Governor Pritzker there. You've got all those fucking losers who are also in charge of you, and then fucking absolutely forget it with any southern state. Like, you could maybe make the statement like, what about Georgia? That's a big city for that. No, that's like there's a reason
the South just hasn't really had a strong union culture since like the garment workers left.
No, it's all right to work. It's all right to work shit there. It's actually, I had a friend, a fun little anecdote. First of all, they shoot a ton of movies down in Georgia because it's all right to work state. But there was a guy I knew who worked in the industry down in Atlanta, and he knew people who did lots of work for The Walking Dead. And they said that, like, obviously that television show needs a lot of extras and a lot of zombie extras. And they were saying that, like, there's different classes of zombie that they make, where they have the ones in the front that have like the full makeup, and then they have the ones that are slightly behind that are a little bit more obscured by the camera, so things aren't as detailed, and then everybody behind that is just sort of given like generalized sort of like shabby clothes and stuff. The ones in the very front still only get paid like $50 or $60 for like 10 hours of work, which is like, or it's so. And that's just all that right to work shit. It's like
Mhm.
the South is just fucked with that shit. You can't. It's a wall of that, and you would run into that. So you're absolutely right. New York and New Jersey. New Jersey's weird. I mean, like they're right next to us, obviously, but I feel like you can kind of like it's a weird state.
So right now, New Jersey has a progressive Democratic governor, ostensibly. So basically, there's been a lot going on in both of these states, even before Prop 22 passed.
Mhm.
In January, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo was going to have a commission to study gig worker classification, which many thought was going to be an opening for New York State to pass a law defining gig workers as employees. But that didn't get included in the budget because of coronavirus. And then there have been a bunch of bills floating around. Some New York State assemblymen have been trying to pass some sort of AB5 like law, which would have made Prop 22, which would have made gig workers employees. And then another person had an interest, Diane Savino, weird law. It would have classified gig workers as independent contractors, but it would have allowed for that third category worker to unionize.
That is very. See, this is the kind of thing. Well,
Weird.
That's very goofy. And I would say, as a gig worker, I mean, you potentially do have an opening for some sort of third option there because it is kind of a weird class of work. It just doesn't necessarily have to be evil the way that Prop 22 is, and in that way. And I would say, broadly speaking, here, this is my official Danny prediction. I don't think they're going to be able to do it in New York. Like I don't. They could.
Yeah.
I think they could. I think they literally could spend $1 billion, and I don't think they're going to do it.
So far they've spent between January 2017 and June 2020, Uber and Lyft have spent a combined $11.5 million lobbying New York State using 16 different shadow firms.
See, honestly, I would have expected it to be more. And I think they know it's an uphill battle here. Because I said this in a previous episode, California, for all of its progressive bona fides, it's like, it is, I still consider it, and I still look at it as like a Wild West situation.
Mhm.
Like it's still it's newer. Shit isn't as old there. There's less of an industrial history in that way. And for that reason, you can kind of get away with shit out there, which you just kind of can't
Right.
in New York State. And like, I really think it would be an uphill battle for them here. Obviously, in New York City is the most populous center in New York State as a whole. So I really don't even consider whatever happens outside of
It would have to happen in Albany. It couldn't happen in New York City. I mean, there's no way. I mean, you're right that like New York has much closer ties to labor, but it should be noted a former Cuomo communications director is now Uber's head of work communications,
Mhm.
and he's married to a current top Cuomo aide, Melissa DeRosa, and another former Cuomo staffer has been lobbying for Lyft since 2014. So there is still this. It's there's still certain parts of the Democratic Party, even locally, via Cuomo, who have some ties to Uber and Lyft and big tech. And things like the Amazon deal, which ultimately failed, was pushed by De Blasio and Cuomo together. So this is something that it's not. I think that the Democrats have more things in our favor. First off, progressives in New York have more things in our favor. First off, there's no referendum culture like there is in California. So they're not going to do this big public campaign to override a state law like they were able to do in California. One of these corporate referendums, basically. Then, second off, we don't have Silicon Valley as like the beating heart of our economy. Okay.
Yeah. Absolutely.
We are fortunate, and we have Wall Street instead that we are beholden to. We are that's a joke. And so we're not going to have this sort of political and cultural pressure of Silicon Valley imposed upon us. And third, just unionization is just much higher here, and just union culture is here, and unions are just much more powerful here than they are.
No, and you make a really good point too, because it's hilarious because you're like, yeah, of course New York City is totally beholden to Wall Street, and then you get into the question of like, if you are a gambler, if you're one of those people who's shorting stocks, you're shorting Uber and Lyft. You're not like, you don't have that fucking cult doe-eyed look that they do out in California where they're just like, technology as the future. Like, it's always follow the gamblers. What are the gamblers doing? You know,
Totally.
like that's what people said about, like, will Trump win the election and stuff like that. It's just sort of like, fuck all of the conjecture. What are the gamblers putting bets on? All right. Like, that's what matters. That's what matters most. And if you go down to just a financial point, it's like Uber and Lyft, those are losers, you're getting like 20 to 1 to 100 odds. That's not good. Those are bad odds.
Yeah.
And then we also have like a culture out here that is significantly different when it comes to our executive branch, because like, in like 9-month-ish history, recentish history, it has been somewhat favorable to Andrew Cuomo. But like, my God, people hate that guy here.
Yeah.
I hate that guy here. It's not a death sentence to call the quote unquote Democratic governor of New York a piece of shit all the time. Like,
Totally.
It's that is another weird part of New York culture where you could just be like, yeah, that guy sucks. I fucking hate him.
Yeah.
And that's not just like us, like left people. It's like it's conservatives. It's
I mean, that's how Republicans have gotten into power. Like, before the rise of the left in New York with like the Zephyr Teach Out campaign and a few other, like, kind of like the rise of the progressive left here in this state, the only alternative to like crony centrist Democrats were Republicans, and they would campaign on anti-corruption platforms, and they'd win because everyone was like, yeah, fuck Albany political party machine politics. So yeah, absolutely. I want to move on really quick to
please
other states. Looks like there are a few other states that it could be a target of. New Jersey is one of them that could be passing some sort of AB5 like law. Basically, they introduced a bill that would classify gig workers as employees like AB5 did. That hasn't come up for a vote yet, but in January, Governor Phil Murphy signed 5 laws that were very pro-employee, very pro-labor. 3 of them were just about contractor-employee misclassification. One of them would impose personal joint liability on tech companies for misclassifying their gig workers.
Okay, interesting.
So it would like Dara Kasha, I'm sorry, his beautiful Iranian last name. He would face personal liability in New Jersey for the misclassification of the workers in New Jersey. So that passed. Okay, so once they actually get it, such that they will classify Lyft and Uber drivers as employees in the state of New Jersey, huge penalties. Okay, they have also New Jersey has also New Jersey fined Uber $650 million last year for not paying unemployment and disability insurance taxes. So I mean, they are really setting themselves up. They're setting themselves up for some sort of AB5 like law in New Jersey. I think that's going to happen pretty soon, honestly.
Yeah,
that could happen, and New York could happen. Other states where there's some battles going on, there's been litigation basically in New Jersey, Connecticut, and Massachusetts because they have on the letter of the law something that is similar to AB5 already. They have this 3-part ABC test that would have that, as it was interpreted in California, would have given gig workers employee status. However, that law hasn't been applied by those local courts to say explicitly Uber drivers are employees because they've been caught up in litigation with these companies, with Uber and Lyft, for years now, basically.
Yeah.
So Uber and Lyft are in huge litigation, multi-year litigation with New Jersey, Connecticut, Massachusetts, I believe, to stop courts from even hearing whether those state laws would classify gig workers as employees. And they're using this arbitration crap that is the Supreme Court recently ruled against, but it's going to come up soon, I think. So those states could be coming up soon as well.
It's such an uphill battle here. I mean, Massachusetts they just won a right to repair law, which is different than what we're talking about, but also similar because it's it's harmful to tech companies. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's like the whole thing where it's like if you break your iPhone, Apple is pretty much the only one who can effectively repair many elements of it like that. And again, that happened in Massachusetts. Like, I mean, if I were Uber or Lyft, I would try with like a weird middle ground state like Pennsylvania or Ohio, But right now, their eyes are so set on the prize of New York that they're fighting way above their weight. Like you can't do that. And like I bet they see markets like Ohio and Pennsylvania as like things where they don't want to invest in that kind of thing. But like that's where you could potentially get a win like that if you're Uber or Lyft. But like just going straight for New York like that, it's like it's still way too antagonistic here. And and it's good. It's absolutely good. It's antagonistic here, obviously. So I just I think right now. I mean, we fucking kicked out Amazon. They were going to be going to be here, and there was so much pressure by it that we fucking kicked them out. And oh my god, looking at that fucking stupid fucking Cuomo's face. When he fucking like, well, it appears that we will not be having Amazon here. He speaks really weird. He has like a really wet mouth with it in the T's when he says that what you are doing is not what we should be doing.
Let's try not to be obnoxious and offensive in your tone. Because you're 100% wrong. I don't know if you were here or if you were paying attention. But that has been in effect for over a month.
Like that's how he speaks. Like that. Yeah. That's his cadence. I'll put a Cuomo
quote. You're making him sound like Nosferatu or something.
Yeah.
So anyways, those are all the states where it could happen. I know there's some people who have been looking at Oregon, Washington, and Colorado as well as potential places where there might be some sort of laws that would make gig workers employees. And this is all places where major markets of Uber and Lyft, really, big tech presence there. And so they're probably doing a lot of lobbying in these places because they have industry there. And there's also people who are pushing on the other side pretty hard. So they have to kind of, in some ways, while I agree with you, they would choose somewhere that's a little bit lower stakes and maybe have a better chance. They probably have to just follow the fight a little bit because there are progressives in these jurisdictions who are trying to threaten their business model as they say it. They have to kind of follow it a little bit.
Yeah, they are. Did you? Have I ever told you about what happened with Uber in Portland?
I don't think so.
Oh my god, it was hilarious. This was probably 2012 because remember for a while Uber just didn't operate in major cities, and so it was in SF and New York and what have you, but it wasn't in Portland, and they fucking threatened the Portland City Council so much. They're just like, we're gonna open here, and Portland City Council's like, you better fucking not. And they did. Like one day, randomly, the Uber app worked in Portland, and there were people like Uber just openly flaunted local law and started operating, and it's their whole thing. They just break the law.
Wow.
They'll openly break the law until they get an opening.
Right.
And then they just drive a wedge in and slowly, force their way in. But I think you are right. I would also be curious to see what happens in those weird states like Oregon Colorado. Those
That'd be
are big
interesting. And
ones.
they have tech presences now. I mean, they're like tech
huge ones.
people
Huge ones.
want to live in those places. I mean, especially like a city like Seattle.
Yeah,
Denver.
Washington State is weird. Washington is an extremely progressive place, but there is also huge. It's arguably the second biggest tech presence.
Yeah.
So I am really curious to see what could possibly happen there.
Totally.
But yeah, it's all up in the air for sure, and I'm very curious to see. I think you're right. That you are right that like in order to like hedge their bets, they have to follow progressives and basically threaten them.
Because if there's one state, if one state gets it to be enforceable that these gig workers are employees, and it doesn't sink the company, their entire stake of legitimacy in arguing that it would is ruined. Like you can't it's kind of like it's more about control and controlling the narrative than it is about losing that particular amount of money in New Jersey or whatever, or facing this additional liability in these sorts of states. If you cede this position and make these workers employees in any state, it's going to make every state be like, yeah, let's do this. This is ridiculous.
Yeah, I also do. I also do think it is. I think it is really funny because that argument is it's so funny where they're like, you can't make our independent contractors employees or else we'll go bankrupt. And it's like any reasonable person would just be like, what's your business model? Like, how do you make money again?
How much money are you spending in order to not pay these people normal amounts of money? Like in litigation, they're spending insane amounts of money in lawsuits fighting this stuff. This Prop 22 campaign, $205 million in like 4 or 6 months. $200 million. Okay. And I'm not, these are anecdotal examples, but think about how many times they have to do this, all the lobbying they have to do. And then think about like how much all of these executives are probably getting paid. Like there are so many ways that they could make a taxi company make money.
Yeah, it's hilarious. I mean,
taxi
Uber,
companies have made money before. This is
they
not
have
an impossible thing. You put a GPS on a taxi company, it is not going to make it go bankrupt. That's ludicrous.
Yeah, it's all the other things. It's all the other. I mean, you could make the argument that you just fucking slim down all these fucking people in these companies where you don't have an executive assistant to the VP for marketing or whatever,
right?
Like that. And I mean, because as it stands right now, Uber and Lyft, they're just these hilarious, fucking, right before World War I hemophiliac, children of czars, where it's just like, oh my God, make sure he doesn't fall on the ground or he'll die. Like they all these Habsburg losers who are so inbred that like just one major financial thing will just send them right through the toilet, and they have to constantly they have like I said, they have these bloodborne illnesses.
Yeah, and in the meantime, there's just all these. Their actual employees are some of the most vulnerable Americans out there. Like they're the ones who are like, this is like a corporate hemophilia, but like actually people who are reliant on this are incredibly empirically vulnerable people. Like,
yeah,
the minimum wage is so low that they have to take this second job, and this is the only way that they can not get evicted from their house, or they do this full time and they don't have good health insurance and they can't get a job anywhere else, and so they have to do this. I mean, like, or like whatever, or like, they're just trying to make it in stand-up comedy, and that's the most vulnerable person of all because they're artists.
I look, first of all, I think we coined a term today, corporate hemophiliac. Like that's dude, that's like, I'm going to take credit for that. Like, or I think we both take credit for that. That's what these companies are. They're corporate hemophiliacs. They touch them and they die, or move them or disturb them and they die. It's I think from a very just like even if you just want to get pragmatic about it, just like the whole mythos behind tech companies is that they were like they were started in a garage.
Yeah.
And it was just four dudes shitting in a bucket and eating pretzels all day. And that's how they got along for the first year of their existence. And now they're at this place where they're like, yeah, I'm pretty sure what we got to do is hire 5 more VP execs. That's what's going to keep us afloat,
Yeah,
or
we need these Obama administration officials.
yeah, and then or even if they are hiring people who are like actual, developers and back end, coding designers and what have you, then then you encounter the even thornier problem for them, where it's like you can pay a person who is like a back end like systems engineer at Uber $50,000, but if you're forcing them to work 60 hours a week, 70 hours a week, it doesn't matter how much you pay them. You could pay them $60, $70, $80,000. Then you get into an even thornier problem where they're sort of like, man, I should really unionize as a tech worker because this fucking sucks, then that's I mean, I would really like that. I think is the real true Wild West of especially since we're talking about unions and this kind of stuff is the eventual tech unionization wave, if that ever does happen.
There's it's an interesting perennial question. I feel like there's one tech company that did unionize. I think it was Kickstarter. I think Kickstarter.
They tried. I think.
Oh,
yeah.
Did they fail?
I think it failed, or yeah. I remember it didn't do well. They tried and it was not.
No, they did it. They pulled it off.
They did. They did pull it off.
Yeah, the first major tech company in the United States to do it in February of this year. They pulled it off.
Oh wow. Okay.
They voted to unionize.
Yeah, that's great. See, I love that. Yeah, it does. It does. I think it's honestly a spirited thing, because we look at these tech companies as these huge monoliths that are unmovable, but there's a reason that they act so frantic and so erratic when they have these little challenges come up, because really at the end of the day, they have challenges from them that are keeping them on their heels from all angles. And if we can just get tiny wins on them, I think it's a death of 1,000 cuts kind of thing. And it's not like you need to just like outlaw them or anything like that, or you need to try to do that. Just like cut away at them, baby. Make them.
I mean, it's just like these people are brand new to being oligarchs. Like there is no. I've spoken to people about this before, like just in conversations. There's no like equivalent yet to like the Ford Foundation, which like does arts grants. Like San Francisco has lost so much of its creativity and artistic scene because tech people are nerds and they don't know how to be an oligarch in the way that like oil barons like oil barons do, and they don't know how to like work with the media in the way that like Wall Street does, like, and be like, listen to the media and recognize media's power. Like Peter Thiel just shut down Gawker and paid millions of dollars to do it in these like private litigations for these invasion of privacy suits. And Wall Street wouldn't have done that. I don't know if like industrial powers would have done that in the same way. They say what you will about all of these behemoths of the past, they at least are aware of their position. Tech companies are still kind of riding this. No, come on. I stood for. I'm not a bad guy.
I'm not bad.
Climate change is really important, and I am a social liberal, and I was raised with the right values, and I'm a fucking nerd. Revenge of the Nerds.
You're absolutely right.
They don't understand that they are alphas now, and when you're an alpha, you have to play a certain role, and part of that is, I don't know. There's just they're just not honest with themselves yet, I don't think.
No, they still think of themselves as outsiders, kind of like you're saying, and like like Mark Zuckerberg has what, $70 billion, something like that. He's getting close to being a centibillionaire, you know, and he still looks like an ugly ceramic bust. Like he looks like fucking Mark Zuckerberg, the fucking guy, Twitter's former CEO, Mark Zuckerberg, Jack Dorsey, all these even Jeff Bezos, all these people. Jeff Bezos, who's arguably the guy who's probably doing the best job of like leveraging stuff. They all still look like they have no media training. Like they have no, like they can hire an army of publicists and stuff like that, and you're right, they still don't know how to effectively, you know, swing their money around in a way that doesn't just look comical and Howard Hughes-ish, you know, like
Right.
it's all just
they're kind of in like this level of greed right now, in the way that like oil barons in like their initial dozen years were super greedy. Like they're in more of a there will be blood
Mhm.
type of greed, because they're still ascending, you know, and they're still doing this. Yeah, so they're not like institutional powers. Like Jamie Dimon's a horrible dude, you know, CEO of JP Morgan Chase and all this. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to give these people credit. I really don't. Like, I shouldn't be saying that they're good.
they're not. You could say,
You know,
like, they're not good. None of these people are good. There's just things from a pure selfish standpoint that some of these people who have been in it for longer are doing that just makes more sense if you look at it from a completely devoid of emotion. It's like baseline, they're evil. We all already acknowledge that. But some of them, you look at them and you're just sort of like, why are you doing that? Why
I
you
guess I'm
doing
just like
that?
criticizing their attitude, right? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyways, we are probably not gonna have time to get into the second subject. Danny, you want to just do that for an extra ep sometime?
Yeah, we should do that later. I think we've had a really good discussion today. Actually, it was pretty fluid.
Yeah. I think so too. So we'll talk about that in the. You want to do a Patreon or you want to do an extra?
We could do an extra. I mean, I also do just want to hear what Gabe. I kind of want to hear what he says about it too. So
Yeah,
like,
folks, the part 2 of today, it's a wild little story. I think it's worth us talking about for more time than we have right now.
But otherwise, you know, good discussion, a nice good you know, what am I getting at here? A nice little meal. A nice. I went to a diner for Thanksgiving, and I ate some like an okay Thanksgiving meal. It was weird. It was like it was almost empty.
Was that okay? Was it all right?
No, it was fine. I enjoyed myself. There was a lot of yams on the plate, though. There was a huge amount. I think they ran out of mashed potatoes and they just fucking doubled up on yams for me. And they asked me, like, they were like, "Do you want string beans or corn?" And I was like, "Oh, corn." And it was like they had unloaded an entire can of corn
Nice.
on my plate. So it was a goofy looking Thanksgiving, but yeah.
We had a goofy one as well on Thanksgiving. We are in a bedside community group, and we just like bought a plate from someone for $15 and just in the neighborhood, and just picked it up from their apartment. It's really nice. It was actually really, really, really good. And we just like stayed in and watched a Hitchcock movie, I think.
Nice.
So
nice.
Yeah, it was Thanksgiving's weird, man. But I actually had a pretty good Thanksgiving weekend, all things considered.
Not bad,
folks. Anyways, stay good out there. And thanks for listening. And we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, we'll see you on the flippity flop.
Flippity flop. My name's David Bradley Eisenberg. I gotta say my full name. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's me.
Danny Feltz. See you guys later. All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.